Welcome to my channel, where each story unfolds like a plot twist that will leave you breathless from the first second. Today, I promise you'll be both thrilled and thrilled. A special cup of coffee at a family brunch turns out to be bait, and a 29-year-old wife calmly turns the tables, exposing her husband and sister-in-law's elaborate poisoning plot with a cup swap, a recording, and the hospital and the police getting involved. In just 1 to 2 moves, you'll see how the strange metallic taste from her coffee leads to a murder conviction and her dramatic journey of rebirth. How much can calmness defeat jealousy and dark ambition? If you're into these tense, satisfying legal revenges, subscribe now and turn on the bell so you never miss another one sip and you'll get goosebumps story. The wide glass windows of the white brick house in Green Hills threw a clear sheet of sunlight over the dining table, as if someone had laid a thin piece of silk across it. Family frames hung down the hallway, reflecting the same story in slices. A wedding in Charleston, a lakeside camping trip, last Christmas with a green wreath over the fireplace. In every photo, my sister-in-law Nina occupied the most flattering spot, the brightest angle, her smile magazine ready. It was Sunday, what we still called family brunch, and Nina's glossy walnut table was already crowded with quiche, bacon, rocket salad, strawberry jam in glass jars, a tray of golden waffles, and one thing more important than all of it, coffee. Don't you want to try the coffee I made just for you, honey? James, my husband, sat across from me, lifting a white porcelain mug with a gold C, smiling a strange smile that never reached his eyes. The steam carried the faintest metallic smell, like a spoon lightly touching the rim of a glass. I sniffed, my stomach tightened. My name is Christina, I'm 29, and if anyone had told me I'd one day sit at my sister-in-law's table, stare at a cup of coffee, and wonder if my husband was trying to poison me, I would have laughed. And yet here I was, 3 years into a marriage and countless accidental food poisonings. I'd learned to be careful, especially around Nina. She had a gift for arranging scenes where I came off clumsy, inept, unsteady, always wrapped with that serene smile of hers. Oh, it's just a coincidence. How thoughtful, I said, forcing the corners of my mouth up. In my throat, a cold thread ran the length of my spine. Smells strong. Nina set her spoon onto its saucer, the clink like a single note. Her own cup still wore an untouched ring of crema. James has become a barista lately, she said, voice easy, eyes narrowing. He's practicing every extraction. Just for you. I heard the weight on for you. And my hands went cold. For weeks now, James had been at Nina's place more often, with the excuse of planning a surprise for our anniversary. Whispered conversations paused the moment I walked in. Texts skimmed across screens and disappeared. A few strange receipts, and suddenly today's coffee smell felt like the answer right under my nose. I lifted the cup, tipped it, pretended to sip. The metallic tang lurked like a spot of rust. I looked into the brown surface, looked up, and caught James flick his eyes toward Nina. Quick and fine as a hair, but enough. I need to take a work call and use your study after, I murmured, phone in hand. My boss pinged me. Go ahead, Nina smiled thinly. Just don't spill anything in my office. I stood, and at the exact moment I passed behind her chair, my heel caught on the rug. A sway of my body, a little gasp. Oh no! And in the beat of a heart I'd slid my cup into Nina's spot. It all happened fast enough to look like a fast-forwarded clip. James half rose, napkins rustled, spoons rattled. Sorry, I breathed. So clumsy. Nina patted her skirt, forced a smile. It's fine. Just don't do anything in my office. I walked down a corridor scented with fresh beeswax, to the study door. It was ajar. Just enough for me to stand in the shadow and see straight down the hallway to the table. On it, the 2 cups had returned as if nothing had happened. One by James, one in front of Nina. In the thin light, I watched Nina's slim fingers lift the cup. Part of me wanted to rush out, to shout, to stop it. But I'd had too many nights retching in our bathrooms. Too many hours curled on tile listening to my heart drop in single beats. I needed the truth. This tastes odd, Nina said casually, her nose wrinkling then smoothing, and she took another sip as if to prove she wasn't worried. James kept his head down, scrolling, his face suspiciously blank. I kept the phone in my palm and slid the recorder on. Outside, a bird tapped the glass with a soft thunk, and Nina's gaze snagged for half a beat. How did you make it? She said, setting the cup down, the spoon nudging the porcelain. the metal on china ringing in my ear like a distant bell. A tiny tremor ran through her wrist, so slight only someone waiting for it, someone like me would see. I gripped the doorframe, the wood grain pressed into my palm. I tried a new recipe, James said, fastening on a smile. Exactly how you like it. You mean how Christina likes it? Nina teased, eyes flicking. For her. I pulled a deep breath to steady the coil in my gut. Last month I'd wound up at urgent care after flower tea at Nina's. The doctor shook his head. Atypical reaction. And Nina wrapped her arms around me with a sweetness that hurt my teeth. Before that, a breakfast of fried eggs and sourdough bought me an overnight at the hospital. James decided I must have taken expired vitamins. The coincidences stacked and stacked until they formed a pattern. Nina took a third sip. Something in her throat slowed, like a gear gummed with butter. She set the cup down and inhaled. For the first time her hand wasn't animated but statue cold. James, Nina said, voice low enough that only the listening kind would catch it. That's strange, my heart. James jerked up. A flash in his eyes he didn't hide in time. His chair scraped the floor. Are you okay? He asked, the U sliding out like a command. Nina braced a hand on the table edge and drew another breath. Her face shading half a tone like a shadow pulling down. It's like tingling. She laughed thinly, tried to lift the spoon, and it slipped from her thumb and rang. James, what did you make? The moment was eggshell thin. I stepped out of the dark. The phone had been recording for minutes. The room's sound seemed stripped of a layer. I could hear the collar of James's shirt whisper against his skin. He glanced at the cup in front of Nina, his face gone pale green. I saw the small, meaningless bruise beside his eye, the kind people get when they sleep poorly. That cup, he said, catching on his breath. It's not yours. Whose is it? I asked, calmer than I expected. I didn't say her name. I didn't have to. In a second all the stonewalling, the pretending, the brunch day selfies evaporated, exposing the lattice beneath, envy, scheming, the fear of being left behind. Nina stared at me, pupils pinched by the light, lips trembling, her hand sweeping empty air. Call 911, she whispered, voice cracking. James, my heart. I can't breathe. She slid out of the chair. Her knees met the rug, her 10 fingers curling like leaves touched by frost. I dialed, my voice as even as if I were reading off an account number. We need an ambulance at 1542 Maple Grove Drive. A woman is showing a severe reaction after drinking coffee. She's conscious but shaking and short of breath. I stayed on the line. My free hand trembled, but not enough to drop the phone. James dropped to his knees, grabbed for Nina's arm. It wasn't for you, he blurted, the words dull as a blunt knife. I told you. It wasn't your cup. Then whose? I tilted my head, my shadow stretching across the floor to nearly touch Nina's feet. Mine. Nina struggled upright, dark hair falling from its pin, a strand sticking to the sweat at her temple. Shut up, she hissed, clawing for the last scrap of control. This was just to make you take a week off. The Henderson meeting next week, don't you? Her words shattered into ragged breaths. The dispatcher walked me through, checking her breathing, rolling her on her side, not letting her drink water. I followed like a program machine. In my head, scraps of memory clicked into a single picture. The night at the Italian place when Nina hugged me from behind while I puked, perfume still warm on her shoulder. James's, I'm heading to Nina's to plan something, text landing exactly on my big presentation days. The odd bottles and drawers labeled with symbols only someone deliberate would use. If only is the most dangerous phrase in a life. If only I hadn't noticed the metallic smell today. If only I didn't wear heels easy to trip on. If only I hadn't learned to remember the tiniest things. A siren split the air. I went to unlock the door, guided them in, my palm tacky with sweat. 2 EMTs brought in a gurney, quick hands, scanning eyes. They asked for symptoms. I answered cleanly, my voice steady. They took her pressure, fitted an oxygen mask, asked if she'd taken anything else. Nina looked at James, pleading and blame tangled, then shook her head like a child used to lying. James reached for her wrist. I'll go with you, he stammered. She's my sister. No, she's her. He ran out of words halfway through. Do either of you know if she drank anything besides coffee? One EMT asked, eyes flicking to the porcelain cups. I looked straight at James. He will. I said, lifting my phone just enough for the screen's light to shine into his eyes. Because he made it. His throat bobbed. Adam's apple jumping around a confession. I saw his mouth twitch. A movement so small, but I've learned to read it. I just added a little syrup, James said, voice off key. Maybe she's allergic. I am too, right? I smiled thinly. Like last month, the month before, and at Christmas. One EMT glanced up, his eyes needle-sharp, then nodded as if pinning a detail to a board. They lifted Nina onto the gurney. She clawed for James's hand. Don't say anything, she rasped, breath grinding like stones. Let me handle it. In a flicker of clarity she turned toward me. Eyes that once lived in mirrors now facing me across a cliff. You switched the cups, didn't you? A feeble smile, something grotesque between respect and hate. I didn't answer. I followed them to the door, the recorder still running, and emailed the file to myself with the only name I needed. Brunch, for. The porch breeze was oddly cool. Like it carried rain though the sky was blue. I climbed into the ambulance at the EMT's ask, family rides along, and left James standing there, eyes wild. I'll drive behind, he called, voice flimsy, hands shaking too hard to get the key in the ignition on the first try. The ambulance doors shut, the latch clicking like a gavel in a court not yet convened. The route to Nashville General cut past oak trees and a run of country music signs. Red lights bloomed, and the line of cars parted to let us through. Nina lay on the gurney, her heart rate drawing green teeth across a monitor. Her eyes were half open, tracking some point on the ambulance ceiling. Christina, she said my name, for the first time all morning without the shellac of politeness. You think you won? I'm not thinking about winning, I'm thinking about breathing, I said, looking at the mask covering her face. And about looking in a mirror without throwing up. I turned to the EMT, asked about the blood pressure, SpO2. They answered in numbers, professional and calm. I knew these sounds, the steady beeps, the hiss of air rubber soles on linoleum. The sounds of a place where people hold on to life with science and procedure. I felt a strange peace. The peace of having decided what to do and waiting for the second hand to move. We pulled into the ER bay, doors flew open. A team in white coats met us, pushed the gurney into a bright room. A young nurse fired questions. I gave answers like a file I'd had ready for months. Age, allergies, history, how long till symptoms, who made the drink. A tall, lean woman doctor with salt and pepper hair, eyes like a wire, looked at me one beat longer after that last answer. Who made the coffee? She repeated, level. My husband, I said, not blinking. She nodded once. We'll run talk screens. Thank you for being precise. She glanced at the phone in my hand. And the recording? When people keep getting accidentally sick after similar meals, you need a memory other than memory. She didn't smile. That kind of memory helps the law. She signaled for more oxygen. I stepped back and watched through the glass. Nina lay still, dark strands pasted to the pillow, the careful beauty she'd managed for years undone by a single loosened pin. James appeared in the hallway minutes later. His shirt was wrinkled, his left hand still stained with coffee. He stopped a few yards away, as if a moat lay between us. Christina, he said, sliding into that smooth tone he used whenever he apologized for forgetting to pick me up after work. Let me explain. Don't, I said, not fully turning. Save explanations for the people who need to hear them. I saw his eyelids flutter, like a bulb about to burn out, before he could switch to his memorized look of sorrow. Nina drank the wrong cup, he whispered to the air. I just wanted you to rest. You worked too hard. It was all. A little mistake? I tilted my head and gave a tired smile. And those mistakes repeat long enough to become intent. At the end of the corridor, the salt and pepper doctor's shoes clicked a neat rhythm. She stopped in front of us, eyes unblinking. Are you Christina? I nodded. We've drawn blood and started a rapid tox. There are some odd signs, not caffeine and not a typical allergy. I want to ask a few questions about your prior visits. It was the question I'd been waiting for. I opened my phone and scrolled to a document called Timeline. Dates, meals, symptoms, who was present. I'd made it on a night I lay listening to rain on our eaves and understood that the only thing I had was precision. The doctor skimmed. Her eyes moved quick but heavy. I'm notifying security, she said. We may also contact the police. James stepped back half a pace, as if the floor had shifted. I heard his breath, a rasp threaded through the AC. Christina, he tried again. I love you. You know that. I know you're good at using love to paper over holes, I said. But you can't use it to wipe away metal. Overhead, a fluorescent tube crackled, then went quiet. The hallway's light steadied, as if nothing had happened. Behind the glass, Nina's eyes rolled up once and closed. Her shoulders trembled. I watched the timer on the monitor and listened to the beeps. For the first time in months, a different film unspooled in my head. A place without the metallic smell, without coincidence. Without smiles that never touched the eyes. A place where I drink coffee for the coffee. The ER door sealed. I leaned on the wall, my phone warm with newly sent recordings. Down the hall, James sank onto a plastic chair. Hands pressed together like prayer. Fingertips shaking too hard to meet. I shut my eyes for a heartbeat, heard the doctor's shoes syncopate away, the HVAC breathe, the quiet of a storm that's passed through the center and still tugs at the edge. I opened my eyes, lifted my head, and when the nurse returned, "The doctor would like you to step in again." I nodded and pushed through the door. On the other side, under unsentimental light, everything was about to become words. And once words set hard, there would be no room left for smiles as thin as paint. The small exam room off the ER smelled faintly of antiseptic, with a narrow window looking out on the parking lot where cars huddled in the sun. The salt-and-pepper-haired doctor came back with a file in hand. Her badge read, neat and spare, F. Phillips, M.D. She pulled up a chair and sat across from me, calm in that way that makes every word fall exactly where it belongs. "I'm Dr. Phillips," she said, her voice warm but exact. The rapid panel shows traces of a compound that wouldn't appear in an ordinary beverage. "I've notified hospital security. Can you tell me more about your prior visits?" I slid my phone to her and opened the timeline I'd kept for half a year. February 10th. Dinner at Nina's, mushroom soup, vomiting and dizziness 2 hours later. April 14th. Chamomile tea at Nina's, racing pulse, tremors. June 5th. Breakfast of sunny-side-up eggs and sourdough, abdominal pain and blurred vision. On each line I'd logged the time, who was present, who touched the stove, who carried dishes out. Dr. Phillips read carefully, pen tapping the table's edge in a small rhythm. "You keep detail well," she said. "I'll request tox comparisons from prior visits if the records are available. We'll also retain the cup, plate, anything that may carry samples." The door cracked open. A nurse poked in. "Security's here, doctor." A radio crackled out in the hall. James stood against the wall, 2 hospital guards a half step away, arms crossed. He turned when he saw me, his face arranging itself into that familiar, pitiable expression. "Christina, I made a mistake," he started, eyes skittering for a handhold. "I only added a little syrup. Nina must be allergic. You know how sensitive she is." I looked straight at him. "Her sensitivity doesn't explain the months I spent vomiting, shaking, going to the ER. If it's an allergy, why does it keep lining up with food or drinks you two prepare? And why did you look like you wanted to snatch the cup back the second I lifted it?" James opened his mouth and closed it. The guards glanced at each other. One murmured into his radio. Dr. Phillips nodded toward someone out of frame. "I've called the police," she said, not turning but loud enough for all to hear. "In suspected poisonings, that's protocol." I felt the air shift, a pain settling tight into its frame. James swallowed, turned to the white brick wall, his shoulders dropping a fraction, like someone with the string pulled from his spine. A woman in a dark navy suit approached, hair tied back, gaze calm and unsparing. Her nameplate read, "Mendoza." "Good afternoon," she said, flashing her badge with the ease of a practiced move. "Lieutenant Mendoza. I'll need to speak with each of you separately. First, I need to secure the scene and collect everything related to the coffee." I held out my phone. I recorded part of the conversation at the house. I also have some texts backed up. Mendoza studied me an extra beat, as if weighing the metal in my eyes. "Thank you. We'll copy those into our system," she said. "Can you walk me through this morning from the top? Take your time chronologically." I told it in pieces, without bolding, without gaps. The habits of my work, explaining to clients why a campaign was effective, now helped me order my own story. The metallic smell, the intentional trip, James's sideways glance, Nina's third sip, the hissed line about Henderson next week. Mendoza wrote at an even pace, sometimes a quiet good go on, sometimes. Why switch the cups at that precise moment? Did anyone else touch your cup beforehand? Because they were waiting for me to drink, I said to the first. And because I needed to know if I was paranoid. To the second. No. Only me. Mendoza nodded and closed her notebook. Thank you. Our crime lab team is en route. In the meantime, I'll take a preliminary statement from Mr. Bennett. She turned to James. You don't have to speak, but anything you do say can be used as evidence. Do you want to call an attorney? James looked around as if one might fall from a ceiling vent. I just want to talk to my wife, he said, voice breaking. Later, Mendoza said, dropping the word like a small anchor. Inside, Nina had been moved from the yard to short-stay observation. Through the glass I saw her lying on her side. For in the back of her hand, skin bloodless. A moment later, Dr. Phillips called me and Mendoza in. Her rhythm has stabilized, she said. Tox shows a compound commonly used in pharmaceutical research. The blood level is below the threshold for immediate danger, likely because she only had a few sips. We've retained samples from her cup, the pot, and the syrup Mr. Bennett described. Thank you, Doctor, Mendoza said. We'll have our lab do a confirmatory analysis. Nina slit her eyes open, saw me, and the corner of her mouth twitched. Are you happy now? She rasped. Switching cups like a party trick. Think you're clever. I think I'm alive, I said softly. And apparently so are you. She turned her face away. A single tear slipped along her temple and vanished into her hair. Out in the hall, another officer arrived with 2 evidence bags. Inside, small white-labeled vials with barcodes, and a thin full-leather notebook. Quick confirmation from Anderson Marketing, he told Mendoza. Per the compliance director's request, they checked Mr. Bennett's desk drawer. This is what they found. James blanched as soon as he saw the sealed bags. His mouth worked but produced no sentence. Mendoza gloved up, opened the bags, skimmed the labels, her eyes narrowing like a lens. Then she opened the notebook. Brief dated entries. Sample A, mild result, dizzy, no vomiting. Sample B, tremors, heavy sleep, good response. Up 0.5 units, too strong, caution. The handwriting was rushed. Some lines looked like they were scribbled mid-meeting. Whose handwriting is this? Mendoza asked, looking up. James stared at the floor. Nina stared at the ceiling. The silence stretched long enough to hear the HVAC. Mr. Bennett? Mendoza tried again. Not mine, James blurted, grabbing for a float. It could be Nina's. She manages everything. I only make the coffee, I finished even. And keep the notebook in your desk at work. James blinked, stuck between 2 halves of a story like a man standing between lanes of traffic. We'll have it analyzed, Mendoza said. For now, based on what we have, I need to detain both of you for formal questioning. Dr. Phillips interjected. Mrs. Anderson needs to remain under observation for at least 24 hours. If you need to interview her, keep it brief and with medical staff present. Mendoza nodded. We'll comply. Then to me, softer, more private. Do you have a safe place to stay tonight? I recommend you don't go home alone with Mr. Bennett. I'll swing by the house for a few things, then a hotel, I said. I'll text you the address. Have someone go with you or we'll assign a unit, Mendoza said in a tone that didn't invite debate. And don't touch anything in the kitchen, we'll collect samples. I nodded. While Mendoza stepped away to request a search warrant, I sat on a hall chair. My hands throbbed as if I'd been hauling bricks, though I'd held nothing but a phone for hours. A middle-aged man pushed a coffee cart by, clean, simple roast, no metallic edge at all. I bought a cup and warmed my palms without taking a sip. Strange how the very idea of coffee, in my head, needed to be scrubbed like a greasy glass. James approached, the guards trailing 2 steps back. He stopped 2 seats away. Do you need anything? He asked, voice small. I can go home, tidy up, toss anything so you feel safe. Don't touch a thing, I said without looking at him. If you want to help, sit down and wait for the police. Christina, he said, like a man who's said my name 1,000 times over dinners and slow Sunday mornings and halfway through movies. I got pulled into this. You know how she is, always pressure. I just chose a side, I said. Every time I collapsed, the person who caught me was a nurse. Not you. He flinched like slapped by a true sentence. Something like remorse flickered in his eyes, or maybe just fear. I no longer needed to sort the two. Noon slid by in procedure. The forensics team photographed each item from Nina's house. The French press, spoons, the amber syrup. A small plastic pipette still stained brown. They sealed, labeled, signed. Mendoza returned with 2 officers and said the warrants had been granted for my house and James's. We're rolling now, she said. Do you want to be present? I do, I said. I want to see what's in my kitchen. On the way, the patrol car drove slower than I expected, as if trying to keep the world from cracking. I watched the windowed city slide by, familiar signs, a florist, a gas station, dog walkers. Everything looked so normal it felt cruel. Up front, Mendoza worked the phone, voice both gentle and decisive. Yes, number 17, ground floor kitchen, second floor office. Prioritize powders, unlabeled spice jars, medicine cabinet. Pull camera footage if present. The front door opened on oak and faded sun. The 2-story we'd bought in our first year, on Nina's investment advice. I stepped in, looked at the dining table, the couch where I'd sprawled on days I went woozy after chicken porridge Nina made. Every object felt like a witness. The search team worked like wringing a lemon. Photos, gloves, one drawer at a time. In the spice cabinet, between labeled jars, cinnamon, clove, thyme, sat 2 unlabeled glass jars. A fine white powder with a faint blue cast. In the drawer by the stove, a small tin held plastic pipettes for dosing coffee. In the medicine cabinet, a cut blister pack with no brand. On a high shelf, a stack of white porcelain cups identical to Nina's. I pointed. Those matched the set she gifted us. An officer nodded and sealed them separately. Any cameras? Someone asked. Yes, but James installed them a few months ago, I said, heart picking up. The app's on his phone. We'll pull it with a warrant, Mendoza said, and reading my worry added, you don't need to try. Let us. James's office door was cracked. I rarely went in. The neat arrangements always made me feel like a guest in my own house. On the desk, besides our wedding photo and the model sports car he loved, sat a thick stack of envelopes. An officer gloved up and opened them. Invoices from a lap supply company, shipped to name a stranger's delivery address, a pickup point near our house. We'll confirm, Mendoza said, eyes fixed on the small print. Could be a friend of his, I said quietly. He has an old classmate in pharma. Mendoza noted it down without comment. I stepped onto the balcony and took a breath. Nashville's afternoon heat had an edge. Below, a squirrel ran the fence, an acorn clenched in its mouth. I leaned on the rail and, for the first time all day, let my body feel tired. When I walked back in, I caught a very young pair of eyes, the crime tech, maybe mid-20s. She gave a small smile. You're doing great, she said to me and no one else. That record you kept, not many people think to. I only did what I know, I said. I work in marketing. I track data. She nodded. Data talks. The question is whether anyone listens. By the time they packed up, the light had turned. Mendoza offered a unit to take me to a hotel. I picked a central spot with a bright lobby and too many people. In the car, Mendoza said, we're holding James overnight for questioning. Tomorrow, once Tox confirms the compound, we'll likely file preliminary charges. As for Nina, the hospital will let us know when she's fit for a longer interview. I want to file for a restraining order, I said. Against both. I've prepared the paperwork, Mendoza said, opening a folder. You'll sign tonight. Check-in was quick. When the door shut, I leaned back on it and slid down to the carpet. The city's sounds bubbled up. Horns, laughter from the lobby, bar music next door. My phone buzzed, my closest coworker. Heard you were at the hospital? You okay? Another from the Henderson client. All good, Christina? We can move tomorrow's run-through if you need. I replied. Thanks. I'll still be there. I'm okay. Not out of stubbornness, because I needed one ordinary thread to pull me through the night. I took a long shower. The hot water calmed my knees. Towel halfway through my hair, the phone lit with an unknown number. This is Christina, I said. Christina? Dr. Phillips, clear as glass. I want you to know, preliminary talks on Nina shows a compound that could not be accidental. It matches what's in the cup. I also reviewed your prior ER records. Some markers are consistent. I've sent a report to the police. Thank you, doctor, I said, eyes stinging like a small wind. I'm grateful you trust the data. I trust the body, she said. The body doesn't lie. I hope you sleep a little tonight. I set the phone down and looked out the window. The city at 10 p.m. was a blue-violet like deep water. I lay down, hand on my stomach, counting breaths. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of sleep. I thought about tomorrow, the Henderson conference room, the big screen, the last slide I wanted to change by one line. How someone's pettiness could become the catalyst for a simple truth. I do my work well not to beat someone, but because that's how I exist. Morning pooled over the hotel carpet like pale gold powder. I woke early and tweaked slides to the whir of the kettle. When I came down, Mendoza was already on a leather chair with an envelope. Update, she said. Initial identification. A research-only compound, not legally available. Likely sources. A friend in the field or a black market purchase. Also, the handwriting in the notebook is very likely James's, awaiting formal comparison. Last night he said it wasn't, I murmured. People say lots of things at night, she shrugged. We keep going. Do you want to swing by the hospital with me before your Henderson meeting? I need you to ID a few more items and Nina may want to talk. I nodded. In the car, I called my team and delegated small tasks. If I'm 10 minutes late, kick off my intro. Make sure the case study video plays clean. Daylight made the hospital feel different. Busy but light. Birches blazing outside the glass. Nina looked more alert, wrung out. She stared at me a long time, then said, a thin thread. Satisfied. I'm not satisfied, I said. I'm at peace. I glanced at the bruising around her cannula. I came to listen if you want. Nina gave a withered smile, no teeth. My brother's weak, you know that? He's flour, add water and he turns to paste. I just have to squeeze to shape him. You think he cooked up a plan? Please. I drew it. I timed it. I took notes. And who poured the coffee yesterday? I asked, not looking away. He did, she shrugged. When it comes to dirtying your hands, anyone can. If they believe they're protecting the person they love. She pressed on love like flattening a bug. Protecting them by making them vomit on their own kitchen floor? I asked quietly and watched her blink slow. You people took everything, she said, eyes cutting past me toward Mendoza standing back. Cups, pot, notebook. But you didn't take what I hate most. The way people just trust you wherever you go. I built that reputation for a decade. Then you walk in, say a few things and they like you. That's that. I didn't take from you, I said. I did my part. Your part made me hungry, she whispered, suddenly confessional. I only meant to make you a little carsick, miss a meeting here or there. But you're stubborn. The more stubborn, the more I wanted to snap. That's when you became a criminal, Mendoza said, stepping in, voice flat. Mrs. Anderson, we'll continue formally with counsel present. For now you should rest. Nina turned her face to the wall. Outside, Mendoza handed me an envelope. The temporary restraining order was active. Go nail Henderson, she said, the faintest flash of pleasure in her eyes. You still have your life. And your job. I made it to the meeting 3 minutes early. The screen was up. The client sat with steaming Starbucks cups. Henderson's lead read. A man in his 50s with the exact right salt and pepper. Looked at me, brows pinched with concern. You okay, Christina? I am, I said. And ready. I presented the way you breathe. Objectives, insights, rollout, timeline, KPIs, risks, and workarounds. On the final slide, I paused and looked straight at them. More important than any toolkit. We'll stand there when something breaks and keep the project on the rails. I learned that at home and I bring it to the work. Reed leaned back, arms crossed, then nodded. Good, he said. Very good. I trust you. After I stepped into the sun. A text from Mendoza. We've detained James. He asked for counsel. I'll update tonight. Another from the court system. Protective order approved. I walked a loop around the block. In the window of a home goods store. A slim pour-over kettle with an S-curve spout glinted. I stopped and smiled at the universe's sense of irony. The next call was an unknown number. Legal counsel for Company X, a man's voice said. We've been contacted by police regarding research compounds potentially diverted by an employee. We'd like to cooperate. Thank you, I said. That's the right thing. In the afternoon I drove to my mother's, a small house in the suburbs. She opened the door and held me for a long time. No questions, just mint tea steeping. Girl, she said, patting my hand. At some point you'll ask yourself why you stayed when you knew. Don't fight that question. You left when you were ready. That's enough. I'm staying at the hotel tonight, I said. Tomorrow I'll go to the station to sign more papers. She nodded. The day after, come here for lunch. I'll roast chicken. No one makes your coffee but you. I laughed. It landed on the table like a glass bead. By the time I pulled up to the hotel, the sky had gone indigo. At the door I looked up and thought of something very specific. Tomorrow morning I'll make my own coffee in a disposable cup, water from the room kettle, the cheap hotel kind, and it'll be the best cup I've had in months simply because it's mine. Night came and the phone rang again. Christina, Mendoza's voice. Tomorrow we'll file preliminary charges. Conspiracy to cause harm, multiple counts. There's plenty left, source tracing, handwriting analysis, statements. But you're on the right track. Sleep. I answered with a small okay. Setting the phone down, I thought about the statements I'd give, the times I'd retell the story in different orders for different people. I wasn't afraid of telling it anymore. Each telling would drive another nail into the frame of truth. And before long, maybe soon, that frame would be strong enough to hold a whole new life. The next morning, sunlight poured down the station's concrete steps in straight, ribbon-like bands. I pushed through the glass doors and caught that familiar blend of hot copier paper, pen ink, cheap coffee, and the invisible antiseptic that makes people drop their voices. At the reception desk sat a tiny cactus beside a slightly crooked wooden plaque. Be kind. Lieutenant Mendoza was waiting, jacket draped over the back of a chair, hair tied back, notebook open to a dog-eared page. We're going to do a controlled call, she said, calm as if we were scheduling a haircut. If you're ready. I'm ready, I answered, surprised at how steady my own voice sounded. The auxiliary interview room was the size of a picture frame. Gray walls, a cold metal table, 2 rigid plastic chairs. A tech set the recorder on, tested the mic, adjusted the levels. Mendoza handed me a disposable phone. Her hand came up level with my eyes, nails cut short and clean like a sentence without extra words. We'll follow a loose script. Speak naturally. The goal is to get him to say it himself. What about Nina? I asked. She's at the hospital with counsel, Mendoza said. They'll manage her. Right now it's James. The fluorescent light hummed faintly overhead. I inhaled. My fingertips were a little cold. The tech gave me a thumbs up. I dialed, my heartbeat counting the wall clock. 1, 2, 3. Enduring the hollow stretch while the network switched. And then a fuzzy pickup. Hello. James, I said low, it's me. A pause, the length of one breath. Then his voice, hoarse from a sleepless night or too many cigarettes. Christina? Where are you? Are you okay? I'm okay, I said, aiming my tone at that middle place between soft and tired, the place manipulators like best, because it gives them an opening. I need to understand yesterday. I can't sleep unless I know why. I told you, he stumbled. It was Nina. She pushed me. I only made the coffee? I pinched the words, released a small question. But you told Nina, that's not your cup. So you knew there was something in the other one. Through the line I heard fingernails rasping the fabric of a chair. James's tell when he's edgy. I didn't want you to drink it, he whispered. It was just something to make you a little tired. You worked too much. Nina said you only needed to miss one meeting. Henderson, I said gently, letting the word drop between us like a paper clip. Say it plainly, James. What did you put in the cup? Where did you get it? Christina, don't say this over the phone, he pleaded, as if he just felt the cord tightening around his ankle. I'll come meet you, I swear. I need to hear the words. I switched pronouns and let my voice sharpen half a notch. What did you do? A long exhale like someone inflating a paper bag. Just a compound. Not lethal, he blurted, and then as if afraid he'd gone too far, he stammered. Used in pharma trials, very mild, only causes tremors and drowsiness at low dose. I thought that's all. Nina said to bump it a little to be sure. I was stupid. Mendoza gave the slightest nod. Her eyes lit the way they do when the last square in a crossword clicks. The chamomile last month. I went on. Benzodiazepine? Or something else? And the June breakfast? Silence. A rustle. Maybe he shifted in the chair, maybe he had a fist in his hair. I don't remember the names, he said weakly. Nina got it through a friend. I only logged the reactions, so if there was a problem we could talk to a doctor. You logged it in the notebook, I said. Sample A, sample B, plus 0.5 units. A small clatter, he might have dropped something. You saw it? I did, I said. And the police did. Mendoza lifted a hand to cut. The text switched to the internal line and stopped the external recording. That's enough, she murmured. Thank you. I set the handset down. My palm was slick as if I'd been holding an ice rock too long. He admitted 3 things, Mendoza said as the door latched, voice like a teacher marking a paper. He knew which cup contained the substance. He knew you were the target and the purpose was to make you miss a meeting. And he knew the source was a friend in pharma. We'll seek a formal arrest. Another officer knocked in, carrying a sheaf of papers. Pulled emails from James's work account under an emergency order. Disjointed lines that stitched into a cold clinical measure. Look at this. Mendoza slid one over. A blank subject message with a string of codes and the note. P213 prepped. Pick up Tuesday. I didn't know what P213 was, but the way the line sat, neat and square, made my stomach dip. We'll have the drug company confirm the code, Mendoza said. For now I need one more thing from you. List every person present each time you got sick and every related item, the cups, pot, teas, syrups. The more granular, the better. I've got to start, I said, opening my timeline. I'll add who washed the cups, who changed the water, who carried things out. We sat like that for an hour, me talking, Mendoza probing, the tech typing, keys tapping like a second clock. On a break, a guard brought in 3 paper coffees. I thanked him, lifted the cup, paused half a second out of habit, then sipped, plain woody bitterness, no metallic ghost. I was surprised my tongue still knew how to trust. By noon my attorney, Dana, 40s, stern eyes, a suit that never seemed to wrinkle, arrived. We took another small conference room. Dana set down 2 folders, one labeled divorce, one criminal. We run these in parallel, she said, blunt. Don't wait. The restraining order is in effect temporarily. I'll file for divorce on grounds of domestic abuse/poisoning. We'll request exclusive use of the house, freeze joint accounts, and change passwords on all digital accounts. I also want you to change your phone number at least until the preliminary hearing. I can change the number, I nodded. But I have to keep my work email. Keep work email, Dana said. But enable 2-factor and change your security questions. And Christina, I know you're very composed, but do not go back to the house alone, not even for 5 minutes. If you need items, tell me and the police. I grabbed a few things last night, I said. But I still need documents, passports, some keepsakes. Fine. This afternoon, Dana flipped her calendar. After we meet the prosecutor, we'll go. I'm coming with you. In the next room, a door banged and a chair scraped. Sound of a conversation knocked off the polite track. Mendoza tapped and leaned in. Update, she said. James is in custody pending charges. We've got confirmation from the drug company. P213 is a lot number for a modified GABA-active research compound, not commercial. The employee, James's old classmate, is suspended pending internal investigation. Is he directly implicated? Dana asked. They didn't say, Mendoza answered. But there are small transfers in the last 2 months into that person's account flagged refund or consulting. Our financial crimes folks will dig. I sat quiet a minute, picturing the path of those little bottles. A sterile lab, the old classmate leaning over, a handoff at a quiet cafe or a mailbox behind a grocery store, and then the syrup bottle sitting on Nina's counter. A shiver ran down me, as if the metallic scent still clung to my house. That afternoon, Dana, 2 officers, and I went back home. The lock clicked with a sound so ordinary it made my heart hurt in an extraordinary way. We moved through the living room, kitchen, my office. Everything looked the same, but my sense of it all had changed. Dana handed me a large canvas tote. Passports, birth certificates, savings, any card with your name, she said. And of course photos if you want. I pulled the passports from the drawer, picked up our wedding photo, thumb landing on James's smiling face. When I turned the frame over, a small slip of paper fluttered out in his handwriting. Storage, Unit 307 Ridge Storage. I froze for a breath like a radio catching a new signal. I handed it to Mendoza. He's renting a unit. She skimmed it, eyes pinching. We'll get a warrant, she said, dialing immediately, her cadence flat and steady. On the other end, someone replied in bureaucratic phrases. She hung up and nodded. Let's go. The facility sat on the edge of town. Long rows of beige and blue roll-ups with big block numbers. The manager checked us in, had us sign, and passed over a small key on a plastic fob. Door 307 rattled up. Cool dust billowed like a long-term tenant stepping over the threshold to breathe. Inside, 2 metal racks, a few clear totes, a black hard case, a cardboard box repurposed from the drug company. Mendoza gloved up, opening one at a time while officers snapped photos first. The first bin held mixing gear. A mini scale, graduated cylinders, pipettes, filters, a box of nitrile gloves, and handheld label maker tags reading syrup, maple, brown sugar. The second held amber glass dropper bottles with P codes and tape-wrapped caps. At the third, my chest pinched. A small photo album, shots of me at client events pulled from social media, some circled with notes in the margin. Weak point: likes herbal tea. Sometimes eats breakfast late before big presentations. A cold ran from my nape down my spine, the kind that doesn't belong to temperature. That's enough for today, Mendoza said. Her voice gave nothing away, but her fingers tightened a hair. Step out and get some air. We'll seal and transport. I walked the corridor between units. Late sun slanted long across the roll-ups. Around the bend, a man was cinching rope around old mattresses. The line rasped on steel. I stood there, hand on a patch of flaking paint, the paler underlayer showing through. Strange how everything has a layer beneath. On the way back, Dana spoke low. We have a very strong criminal case. On the civil side, property, house accounts, we'll ask the court for temporary exclusive use and to freeze the joint account. Remember, don't negotiate alone with James. Route everything through me. He'll try to call, I said. Don't pick up, Dana replied. Or forward it to me. You don't owe him a sentence. That night at the hotel, I stirred an instant packet into a paper cup. I thought I wouldn't be able to drink coffee again, but the raw, woody smell rose up, suddenly simple enough to let me breathe. I sat by the window watching the street where traffic ran like thin ice. I opened my laptop and wrote a short note to myself. Not a diary, just a list. Things I believe. I typed, I believe in data, I believe my body. I believe I was right to switch the cups. I believe in the quiet kindness of the people who helped me. Dr. Phillips, Lieutenant Mendoza, the young tech, Dana. I believe I am not invisible. I believe this cup won't kill me. My phone lit. HR at work. We've been contacted by police regarding a criminal investigation involving James Bennett. The company will fully cooperate. Let us know if you need time off. I thanked them, attached the restraining order, asked them to update security, block James's badge, disable his access if still active. The reply came fast. Done. Another brick clicked into place. The next day stacked like a deck. A meeting with the prosecutor, a curly-haired man in black frames, asking detail with a logic cold as metal. A stop at the hospital where Nina signed to be interviewed with her lawyer present. Her voice thin, sometimes sharp, sometimes sagging into blaming James and then yanking it back toward herself, like someone tugging a silk thread that's about to snap. A late afternoon at my office, where co-workers brought a box of donuts and a small card signed by the whole team. We've got your back. I smiled, thanked them, throat tight. That evening I sat with Dana drafting filings, listing assets, flagging odd microtransfers in the joint statements. The things I'd skimmed past before because in marriage you tell yourself everyone has their own little expenses. We called the bank to add voice verification, changed the safe code, signed up for credit monitoring. I did it all like someone cleaning a yard after a storm. Picking up fallen branches, piling them, burning them. A 9 p.m. text from Mendoza. Arraignment tomorrow. He's charged with conspiracy to cause serious bodily injury, with aggravating factors, possibly upcharged to attempted murder depending on talks and frequency. Bail won't be low. You don't have to attend, but you may. I'll be there, I replied. I want to see. The next morning, a small courtroom. Wooden benches, slow fans, a silver-haired judge with an unreadable face. James shuffled in, eyes sunken, hands cuffed, jail orange dulled with grime. I thought I'd shatter seeing him like that. What came instead was something odd, like recognizing an actor you once knew in a play and now seeing him stripped of stage light. The features minus the glow, just a regular man who'd done unforgivable things. His lawyer talked about work pressure, a domineering sister, no intent to take a life, and waved at a foggy paper about low doses not being fatal. The prosecutor stood, plain-spoken. You don't need a chemistry degree to know that putting research-only compounds into someone's drink is a crime. He put up the recordings, photos, bottle labels, the notebook, the P213 code. The projector clicked. I thought about nights bolting upright, nauseous. Mornings with fingers shaking too hard to button a shirt. The times Nina tilted her head and smiled. Maybe Mexican doesn't agree with you. The judge read out bail conditions. Large cash, surrender passport. James's lawyer objected. Overruled. James turned for the first time, looking at me. That glance flicked across 1,000 versions of us. Meeting at the wedding in Charleston, his arm around me on the couch watching an old movie, his hand on my forehead when I had a fever, and then locked on the present where I sat straight, no smile, no nod, no lifeline tossed. When we stood, chairs scraped the floor in a soft wave. I stepped into the hall. Daylight washed in like water. Mendoza caught up and handed me a sheet. Time for supplemental statements, she said. And this may be hard. We'd like you to do a controlled confrontation with Nina next week. She's contradicting herself. There are points we need you to confirm. I'll do it, I said, hearing my voice settle back into that calm middle where I can stand without feeling my knees. I walked toward the lot. Midday in the city sounded like a loud but tuned choir. I ducked into a small cafe. Pale oak counter, chalkboard menu, plants softening the light. The barista asked what I wanted. Pour over light roast, I said. He nodded, weighed the beans, poured in rings, forearms making a new ritual. Slow, exact, nothing hidden. I watched the water course through the grounds in pale brown swirls. The smell rose, no hint of metal. I took my cup to a corner, sipped, and felt something simple. The bitterness moving straight into me without betraying me. I opened my notebook and made a new list. Things to do this week. Bullet 1. See a therapist. Dana sent 2 names. I chose the one with an office near the park. Bullet 2. Send Henderson the detailed rollout. Start next week. Bullet 3. Pack a few things at home and prep a temporary move to the small apartment I'd been eyeing. Bullet 4. Buy my own kettle for my office. Bullet 5. Sleep 7 hours. My phone buzzed, an odd number. This is James's mother, the text read. I don't know what to say. If you want to talk. I looked for a long time, then set it down. I don't hate her. I just know that conversation won't help right now. I replied later. I'm safe. When I'm ready, I'll reach out. In the afternoon, I met the therapist in the park. Her name was Ellis, gray curls, calm blue eyes. She didn't push, just invited me to tell it the way I wanted. I told it. First the metallic taste. Then the ER nights. Then how the silence in my house had turned into a kind of echo. She nodded and marked a few spots. People think violence is only what you can see and hear, she said when I finished. There are forms that pass through taste, through things we treat as intimate like food. Your body has been speaking for a long time. Today you listened. That's the most important thing. I left as the sky went greenish. On the sidewalk, a little girl launched a sloppy paper plane. It wobbled once and nosed into the grass, and she exploded with laughter at the failure itself. I smiled, thinking of myself, of the falls that teach you how to laugh again. On the 3rd night at the hotel, I slept straight through. No metallic dream, no spoon on porcelain. In the morning, the light was pinking up. I made another cup and stood on the sill. Down on the street, a woman in a ball cap walked 2 caramel-colored dogs. I remembered I used to like running early, and had stopped for months because the dizziness wouldn't let me. I laced up, stepped out, jogged a few blocks, heart steady, breath in and out like an old but good pump. Each step stamped the page. Present. And I thought, not as words but as my body's answer, I'm still here. Back upstairs, an email from the DA was waiting. We're moving to trial faster than expected. Please prepare to be the primary witness, possibly in a few weeks. We'll rehearse beforehand. I wrote back, receive, thank you. My calendar squares were neatly blue. I know hard days are coming. Questions will repeat. Eyes will pry, details will be picked apart. I also know the only thing I have to do is tell the truth the way my job taught me to. Clear, brief, enough. I tapped a new note. Morning, 20-minute run. Afternoon. Henderson status. Evening, witness prep. I added one more line, the first non-survival item in months. Weekend. Call Hannah to book a hair appointment. When I took the last sip, the sun angled across the window ledge into a warm wedge, enough to show the tiny motes floating in the air. Everything has those little moving parts. Even a life that looked set in a glossy dining room with white porcelain cups. I set the cup down, grabbed my keys, and when the cool metal touched my palm I knew, somewhere deep, that I'd changed the locks. Not just on the door. On my life. That afternoon after my first run, I sat in the Dia small office with a glass of water and a clipped stack of yellow forms in front of me. The prosecutor, Hart, curly hair, black frames, and even voice, tapped a pencil 3 times on the table, setting a tempo for a piece I was about to sing. We're going to rehearse, he said. Not so you memorize, but so your body gets used to being watched and questioned. The truth is enough. My job is to help it cross the room. He handed me a printout of the timeline I'd built. In the margins he'd marked in red the spots to tighten. The chamomile tea last month, who touched the pot, the June breakfast, who washed the cups, Christmas, who cleared the table, the coffee morning, the exact beat of the switch. When they ask, why didn't you leave earlier? You don't owe them a sermon, Hart said, looking over his glasses. One sentence is enough, because I believed until my body taught me to stop believing. Don't over-explain answers to disrespectful questions. I nodded, feeling the knots in my head loosen one by one. And if they say I set Nina up by switching cups? I asked. You say, I protected my life, Hart answered. And no one has the right to put a foreign substance in anyone else's cup. He gave me another printout. Victim impact statement. You don't have to read it at arraignment, he explained. But I recommend you write it now. Not to win the room with language, but so you can hear yourself. Every wound needs a structure to close. We drilled for almost 2 hours. Hart played defense counsel, pressing, inserting barbs like, maybe you imagined it. Are you obsessed with work? Do you have motive to hate your sister-in-law? I answered each one, practicing how to sit straight, fix my gaze, and let silence hang when an ugly question tried to drag me under. When we finished, Hart smiled faintly. Good. Calm enough to bore anyone looking to provoke. I left the DA's office and went to the hospital. Nina had been moved to a regular room, window on a stand of maples turning color. Lieutenant Mendoza was waiting with another investigator, who would record the confrontation. We'll keep it short, she said. Her lawyer's here. You don't owe anyone magnanimity. Be truthful enough. Inside, Nina reclined, hair in a low tie, a face too pale to look healthy. Her lawyer, a slim man in a powder blue tie, set his own recorder on the table. I sat opposite, listening to the HVAC tick like a second hand. Christina, Nina spoke first, voice hoarse from meds. You came to see me weak, didn't you? I came to say what I know, I said evenly. And to hear if you have anything to say, truthfully. Nina looked out the window, blinking slow. I hate you, she said flatly, a habit stripped of polish. Not because you took from me. You didn't take anything of mine. I hate you because you're the kind of person people believe. I have to do tricks to get what you have when you just walk into a room. People believe those who do the right thing, I said. If 10 years ago you'd had a version of me in the room, maybe your life would be lighter. Nina laughed hollow. You think I don't know right from wrong? I do. I chose differently. Right doesn't feed ambition. Wrong does. I chose wrong. Her lawyer cleared his throat, a gentle warning. Mendoza set a hand on the table, silent, taut. I turned to Nina. That morning. Did you know there was something in the cup? Nina was quiet a few seconds, then gave a tiny nod. Her eyes suddenly older. Vaguely. I trusted James to control it. I wanted you to miss one meeting. I was both stupid and cruel. And the other times? I said. The teapots, the breakfasts, Christmas? She tilted her head. a small crease tugging the corner of her left eye. The wrinkle of someone who used to smile at the right angle. Sometimes me, she said. Sometimes him. But the ideas were always mine. He colluded because he's weak. I acted because I'm mean. The room dropped a beat. The investigator tapped a marker on the timeline. I felt a strange jolt, pity maybe or grief for some 17-year-old version of Nina, who never learned she had worth without stepping on someone else. I folded that feeling like a scrap of paper and put it away. I didn't come for your self-absolution, I said. I came to put a period on the sentence. From now on we're just two passers-by in the same city. Passers-by, she repeated, lip trembling. I fear you more than court. Because you'll live without hiding. I stood and nodded to Mendoza. Nina's lawyer stopped his recorder, hands careful like sheathing a knife. Outside I leaned against the wall. Mendoza handed me a bottle of water. You did the right thing, she said. A boundary is a legal act as much as a mental one. Do you ever get tired? I asked. Seeing the worst every day. Yes, she said, honest. But I see the good too. Today the good is you standing straight. That night at the small hotel desk I wrote the impact statement. Not as a speech, more like a letter to myself with the court as accidental reader. I wrote about the metallic taste briefly so a reader could smell it for a second, about trust punctured by what can't be seen, about how the most intimate family thing, food, was turned into a weapon, about mornings I wouldn't drink a glass of water on my own table unless it stayed in sight from start to finish, about the shame of explaining to colleagues why my hands shook during a presentation, about my mother's hand in my hair, don't fight the why did you stay, and the relief of being allowed to put the weight down. I wrote, I don't want anyone in the courtroom to cry for me. I want everyone to hear me clearly. I am still myself and the people who harmed me did not take that. The next morning Henderson emailed. Kick off next week. We trust you. I smiled to myself and thought about the pour-over I'd been eyeing. I texted the barista from the small cafe. Do you still have yesterday's light roast? I'd like a bag. He replied, I'll save it. While I balanced those ordinary pieces, the legal gears turned. James's classmate, the name behind the small transfers, was suspended and cooperating. Each time Mendoza updated me, her voice stayed flat and short. Warrant for his email storage approved. Pickup at the post office confirmed. Additional empty bottles seized. I listened, noted, and felt the stones stacking around a deep well. Then came the bank day. Dana and I sat in a glass room while a banker pulled up our joint accounts. There are some odd transactions, he said, pointing at the screen, small amounts, vague memos. We can freeze those pending the court's decision. Dana nodded without blinking. And change the safe code, she said. Today. At noon James's mother called. Her voice was thin, as if after a long fever. Christina, she said. I know I can't ask you to forgive him. I just want to say, James wasn't always like this. He was the shy boy who said sorry when he dropped a jar of jam. But he grew up next to a sister too strong. I'm not excusing him. I'm sorry I didn't raise my son differently. I hear you, I said, sitting on the edge of the bed with a hand on my knee to keep it from trembling. And I hope you live the rest of your life lighter. As for me, I have to do what's right for me. Of course, she said. If you need anything I can do, I'm here. I hung up and let out a long breath. I don't want to chart the guilt lines in another family. My own map is tangled enough. But the boy who said sorry for dropping jam looped in my head like a tune. Not to forgive, I'm not ready. But to remember that harm rarely sprouts from nowhere. The controlled face-to-face with James was set before trial. A cold, bright room, one-way glass, a camera in the corner. James came in wearing jail orange, hollow-eyed, hair grown wild. I sat across a table with the investigator and Hart beside me. He looked at me for a beat, eyes searching for a handhold and finding none, then dropped his gaze. Do you want to say anything? Hart began. James swallowed. I was wrong, he said, voice crumbling like a sponge board. I let Nina steer me. I just wanted you to rest, that's all, and then everything slid. You know I'm weak. You always knew. There was a time I thought weak meant someone I should hold up, I said, fixing on the pen so my eyes wouldn't be pulled to his. Now I think weak is someone who dodges responsibility by clinging to others. You weren't too weak to know what you were doing. You chose. He shut his eyes, pressed his lips, cuffed hands bawling. I remember the wedding, he murmured. The waltz in the ballroom. You told me. We just keep count. I lived behind you by your count. I'm sorry. Let that be the last thing you say, Hart cut in neutral. The rest belongs to the court. When I left, I knew some apologies exist to lighten the speaker, not the listener. Strangely, hearing it made me clearer. I don't need an apology to move forward. I need new locks, new papers, new habits, and new people I trust. The next days I worked like a piano finally in tune. I led the Henderson kickoff, assigned lanes, locked the case study schedule. A young coworker named Maya, eyes bright, said, "I've never seen you shake." I smiled. I shake. I've learned to shake without spilling water. She asked what I wanted to drink. Water, I said. And a coffee, one I make myself. That evening I toured the small apartment I'd chosen, looked at the empty living room, the balcony above the warm streetlights. The landlord, young fast talker, said, "I like tidy tenants." I signed, left the deposit, took the keys. The little chime of new keys in my hand sounded like the notification for a new chapter. The day before trial, Hart called me in. "They may float a plea," he said. "But they'll have to plead to something serious. You don't have to decide now, but I want to know your line." "I want the truth in the record," I said without pausing. "And I want what was used to hurt me treated as evidence, not accident. If a deal thins the truth, I don't want it." Hart studied me, then nodded. "All right. I'll steer by that." That night I moved a little into the new place. A few books, a lamp, a photo of my mother and me at the beach, a kettle, the cafe saved beans. I hung curtains, wiped the table, washed 2 mugs I just bought downstairs. I brewed a cup, opened the window, let the wind cut the coffee into something cool. I set my impact statement on the table, read it out loud, fixed 2 spots, added a line for my mother, "I've put the burden down," and trimmed a line about the metallic taste because it was already enough. I slipped it into a plastic sleeve. I called my mother. "Tomorrow I'll read a piece in court," she said. "I'll be in the back row, but I'll see you." I slept like someone who'd locked the door from the inside and knew no one else had a key. I dreamed, for the first time, not of Nina's house or the yard. I dreamed a bright oak table, a cup of coffee I poured myself, and the laughter of a few new friends. On the table sat a blank sheet. I picked up a pen and wrote a very short sentence. "Tomorrow I will speak." And the words sat there steady, like the first note of a new song. On the morning of the trial, the city wore a thin veil of mist, as if someone had breathed across a pane of glass. I stood in my new apartment and chose a navy blazer, a white shirt, black slacks, flats. Not because I wanted to look tough, I wanted to look clear. I made a pour-over like a ritual. Rinse the filter, weigh the beans, pour the first circle of water, wait 30 seconds for the bloom, then finish in slow, even spirals. Steam rose as slowly as a thought coming together. A neat black coffee, no metallic smell, no sneaking. I took a sip, warmth spreading into my chest, like a lock finally sliding into the right notch. My mother arrived earlier than I expected, bringing a trace of light perfume and fresh detergent. She rested a hand on my shoulder, the gesture from when I was a kid, and stepped back to look at me. "Pretty and straight," she said, eyes wet at the corners. "Speak clearly and briefly like you do at work." "I'll sit in the back." Dana and Hart were waiting at the courthouse door. With a nod from Mendoza. The hallway was wide, the ceiling high, wooden benches glossed smooth by years of waiting. Hart handed me a thick stack of photocopies. I didn't need to read more. Just touched the paper to remind myself the truth had been bound and filed. "Just breathe," Hart said, as if drawing a straight line on a map. "When the other side asks to humiliate you, don't build a wall. Silence is an answer too." Court opened, the jury was seated. 12 unfamiliar faces, eyes trying for neutrality but still tight with the strain of suddenly becoming part of someone else's story. James sat a bench away, jail issue orange as a bright reminder. This is real. He kept his head down, staring at his hands too long, like he hoped a few calluses might give him answers. The prosecutor began in a steady voice, hitting only the keywords: pattern, repetition, escalation, intent. He pointed at the screen, a bottle with a lot number on the label, a French press, A faux leather notebook with Sample A, Sample B, plus 0.5 units scrawled inside. You'll hear about a compound scientist's use in pharmaceutical research, he said. This isn't something that accidentally falls into a Sunday morning coffee cup. You'll hear about the victim's ER visits. February, April, June. And you'll hear the defendant's own words. That's not your cup. Each sentence was a nail driven into a frame. I looked around, Mendoza taking notes, Dana's pen aligned with the edge of her file, my mother's hand on her purse as she drew a long breath. The defense stood, pale blue tie, voice soft as silk. Work pressure, ignorance of toxicology, no intent to kill. A momentary lapse. An older sister's outsized influence. He turned to the jury and invoked a strained marriage. A husband who just wanted his wife to rest. A few low doses that aren't dangerous. Under the table I placed my hands on my knees, fingertips touching lightly, counting an old waltz. First witness, the paramedic. He walked through the morning readings, endless chart numbers. Even voice picking up speed when muscle memory kicked in. Next came Dr. Phillips in a crisp white coat, salt and pepper hair. She explained like a teacher. GABA mechanisms inhibited neurotransmission, low doses causing tremor, drowsiness, motor disturbance, higher doses risking respiratory depression. She presented Nina's blood level graph, then matched it with my prior records. The markers align, she concluded. This isn't random. The sequence describes a rising dose curve. When the defense floated an allergy to a new flavoring, she raised an eyebrow and said, "No flavoring produces a profile like this." The lab analyst took the stand, gloved hands holding sealed bags, talking about chain of custody, LCMS, matched to reference sample P213. The jargon plopped into the quiet. The jurors jotted half phrases, but I could see it land. This was science, not storytelling. Then James's old classmate, hair slicked with sweat, crooked tie, arms flattened on the table like he'd tied himself there. He'd taken a partial immunity deal. He spoke about consulting emails, little packages left at a post office, thought it was harmless trialing. His eyes skittering every time my name appeared in a question. "I didn't think it would go this far," he said softly, voice breaking like glass snapped wrong. Then it was my turn. I stood, placed a hand on the Bible, swore to tell the truth. The microphone in front of me looked like a small black eye. Heart nodded, I sat spine straight. He asked me to walk the timeline. I did, the metallic taste, the stumble switch. "That's not your cup." The spoon clattering, the trembling hands. 911, the ambulance, the white corridor. Dr. Phillips's voice somehow cool and warm at once. I told them about the earlier times. The chamomile in April, the June breakfast, Christmas. I talked about logging every detail about the controlled call, the P213 ready text, the storage unit with pipettes, a milligram scale, and an album of my event photos with notes like, "Weakness likes herbal tea." The defense rose, voice gentle like soothing a fussy child. "Miss Bennett, could you have been paranoid from work stress? Could you have misremembered?" I looked at him, remembering Hart's line. "Don't defend yourself against a question that doesn't respect you." "My body doesn't hallucinate," I said. It vomited, it shook, it blacked out. The doctor matched the markers. "And here is the audio of That's Not Your Cup." With the court's permission, Hart played the clip. James's voice filled the room, small and clear, a string plucked clean. He switched tactics. "You swapped the cups. Were you trying to set up your sister-in-law?" "I protected my life," I said. He smirked. "You hate Nina because of professional rivalry?" I met his eyes. "I hate poisoning. The rest isn't strong enough to make me hate." Nina testified the next day, in a hospital green gown, hair smoothed, a dusting of powder that couldn't hide the blue under her eyes. Her lawyer had clearly prepped her, but Nina is Nina. Some lines won't stay penned in. "I was wrong," she said quietly at the start. "I wanted her to miss one meeting, then two. I was blind." Later, asked where the idea began, she tipped her chin at James. He poured. Her lawyer shot her a look. She bit her lip and turned away. Hart stood and played the hospital confrontation where she'd said, "The idea was always mine." The room tilted a degree. The jurors traded glances, not just at the contradiction, but at seeing both things at once, instigator and accomplice. James didn't testify. His attorney must have known every word would pull another thread. In the dock, James kept staring down as if he'd found something there. A kinder version of himself, maybe, or just a blank. The state's closing was a straight line without breaks. This was not a rash impulse. This was trial and error. Notes, increased dosing. Tampering with someone's food and drink until she fell. What else do we call that but conspiracy to cause serious harm? The defense talked about mistakes, bungled good intentions, no motive to kill, finishing with the shrug of a man who'd played his last card. The jury went out. The door shut. The courtroom turned into a drum. Every cough, every page turn echoed like inside an elevator shaft. I sat still, my mother's hand in mine, listening to the clock on the wall. Heart said nothing. Mendoza shot me a look, lips pressed in a half line that said, almost there. When the jury returned, the benches creaked. The foreperson stood, paper in hand, voice even. We find the defendant James Bennett guilty of conspiracy to commit aggravated assault by means capable of causing death, and as a co-conspirator with co-defendant Nina Anderson. We find the defendant Nina Anderson guilty of the same. The words hit and didn't bounce. James closed his eyes, shoulders dropping like someone had cut a strap. Nina stared straight ahead, mouth slightly open, the shell that had encased her for years cracking into mottled shards. Sentencing came a few weeks later, time enough for pre-sentence reports, risk assessments, my victim impact statement. I held the pages I'd read and reread, crossed out a word, added a period. When the judge called me, I stepped up. The room wasn't crowded anymore, just the people who had to be there. I read loud enough. About the metallic taste, about a meal turned into a weapon, about mornings I didn't dare drink a glass of water unless I'd watched it from start to finish, about relearning how to trust my palate, my body. I ended. I'm not here for pity. I'm here to say clearly that I am still myself, and the people who did this to me didn't get to take that. The judge looked at the files, looked at us, and read the sentence. Years in prison for both, restitution, long-term no-contact orders, mandatory counseling while incarcerated. This court isn't punishing jealousy or ambition, he said. It's punishing a person who used a meal, the symbol of care, to cause harm. I heard the clerk's pen rasp across paper and thought how these words would dry into data points. Today to me they were a stitch. Outside, the sky was big and blue like an open window. A few reporters at the gate, quick questions. Anything you want to say? Do you still believe in marriage? Dana stepped in front of me. I shook my head and smiled thinly. I'll talk to my clients, my colleagues, my family. Not here. The months after felt like a film shifting color. Henderson signed a 3-year extension. We launched the campaign, hit a snag in week 2 on a data import, and I stood in a conference room at 10 p.m. with the team and said, "It's okay. Let's go back to source, check every node." I didn't say, "I've been through worse," but my body knew. When the spot aired smoothly the next week, Maya hugged me in the hall. Oh my God! And in her eyes was the kind of light I thought I'd lost. I saw the therapist, Ellis, regularly. We talked about control and trust, about relearning the tiny things. Letting someone pour water for me, accepting a box of cookies without dissecting the label. I learned to say no without an essay, learned to say that's enough to a story that looped. Once Ellis said, "You've gone a ways. Don't forget to celebrate the short stretches." I bought a nicer kettle for the office and set it next to a frame of me and my mother at the beach. A year after the trial, I stood on stage at the Nashville Business Leadership Conference under warm yellow lights. I spoke about trust at work, about deadlines kept and words kept, about standing next to each other when something breaks. I didn't use my story as a plea for sympathy. I used it as an example. What we do in the kitchen is what we do in the boardroom. What we mix in, what we turn up, whether we pour while looking someone in the eye. The applause lasted longer than I'd expected. In the front row, Hart sat next to Dana. Mendoza smiled from the doorway. Backstage, my phone lit up with a picture from my mom's TV at home. My girl. That night Henderson emailed. Another 3 years. Thanks for always showing up. I laughed, leaned back, and thought of the day I switched the cups. A tiny edit that corrected the whole story. Sometimes James's mother texts, short, polite messages without trying to reopen anything. I reply in kind without slamming the door. Once she sent a photo of James as a little boy, hair wild, face sticky with strawberry jam, grinning. He was once this. I stared at it for a long time, then saved it in a folder called For Later. I don't forgive and I don't feed the hate. I put that photo next to the one of me and my mother at the beach, not to balance the scales, just to remember that harm rarely grows from nothing. Nina wrote from prison. Her handwriting was rigid, like someone done with flourishes. I hate the kitchen here, she wrote. The smell of canteen food makes me think of brunch. I work in the library. First time I've read a book without minding who's watching. I don't know what to say except, I chose. I folded the letter, slid it back into the envelope and put it away. No reply. No need. The new apartment filled in. A bookcase, a few abstract prints by a local artist, a big leaf monstera. I had coworkers over for dinner. I made tomato sauce, pasta, arugula salad. I cooked slow and talked a lot, set white plates on a pale wooden table, poured wine like pouring a long day off my shoulders. When someone said, I'll do the dishes, I didn't jump up like before. I sat and let the water run without standing guard. On Sunday mornings I jog through the park and stop at the little cafe. The barista knows me now. Light roast, pour over? Yep. He slides a brown paper bag with the shop's name across the counter. Yours. I take it home, open it, beans just right, not showy, not sad. I pour over the grounds and watch the tiny bubbles pop. A strip of sun cuts the wall into diamonds. I lift the cup at the window and say out loud, a new habit. This is mine. An email waits from a young woman, the one who once asked me at a conference, how do you stay calm? A coworker just screwed me over. She wrote. I want to quit. But after I read your piece I decided to stay, collect facts, do it better. Thank you. I wrote back. You're allowed to stay or go. Either way your safety comes first. If you stay, keep a timeline. Trust your body. And drink water. I added, half joking. Coffee if you like, but make it yourself. At night I step onto the balcony. The city is a black cloth sprinkled with salt. Distant traffic sounds like waves rubbing a hull. I think of the people along the way, Hart, Dr. Phillips, Mendoza, Dana, the barista, the young tech, my mother, Maya. Together they're a warm mesh around a place that used to be cold. I close my eyes for a few seconds, breathe out, and when I open them I want to buy 2 kintsugi-style cups, seams of gold in the cracks. Not for anyone else to pour for me. To remind myself some things are lovelier after they break, depending on how we see them, where we set them, and what we pour into them. I go inside and write one short line in my notebook. Tomorrow a new cup of coffee, a new page. I'm still here.